Well, hello everyone. It is Dave and Kate today on the Property Trio. We haven't got Mike with us today, but we've got some good listener questions and we've got some Wi-Fi. And where are you, Dave?
On the way, made it back into Victoria last night. So 9 weeks into the trip back into Victoria, not far from returning to Melbourne.
Wow.
We're in Echuca
Oh, nice
on the
one.
Murray.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're
Yeah,
going to start.
beautiful town.
I'm so envious and can't wait to hear more adventures. You've covered a lot of ground in 9 weeks. Now we're going to field Max's
Yeah, we sure
question
have. It's
today.
been once
And
in a
Max
lifetime
writes to us,
experience.
"Hi guys, love the show. I listen to it every week and I want Kate to buy me a property one day. I have a question as a young investor with a decent income and terrible savings. When looking to invest into the second investment property, is it better to buy a more expensive asset at a 90% loan to value ratio? So, in other words, using just 10% and paying your lender's mortgage insurance, or wait until you save up enough to get 80% LVR, hence getting a better interest rate as well. The reason why I'm asking is I'm planning on buying another property, but with my savings plan at the moment, I'm worried the market is moving faster than I can save. Can you discuss the implications of buying a cheaper asset to get into the market sooner rather than waiting for a better asset? In doing so, risking becoming priced out. Noting that the famous slogan of time in the market beats timing the market. Dave.
Yeah, look, I think this is a question that's pretty common for a lot of first time buyers. Should I wait till I get to 80%? Should I get in sooner at 90%? Um, Is it better to get in faster, potentially at a lower price point, or wait longer and maybe get to a higher price point? So let's unpack those questions. Where do we want to start, Kate? With the 90% LVR
Yeah, let's
or
start
get
with
into
this
the
very,
markets? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, let's focus on that one first. So the LVR.
Yeah, okay. So, look, as a general rule, I would be happy for Max to purchase at not a 90% LVR, but it's probably based on the following conditions. And each of these points need to align with your risk profile, which you should determine in consultation with your strategic mortgage broker, buyer's agent, or any other trusted advisor. So, first point would be how much earlier will this get you into the market? I find often getting an LVR of around 90% will get people in the market as much as 1 to 3 years sooner. So I think that is a strong benefit to take action and pay that mortgage insurance at the higher LVR. Um, you've also got to consider how much further the market will grow between now and you saving up to the point that you only need to borrow 80%, because there's a cost to that time lag. Now we cannot be exact on these dates because these are both variables of market movements and the rate of saving that you will have over time. But purchasing at 90% will get you in sooner. And as long as you can retain the appropriate buffer of monthly cash flow savings and available funds post settlement on the new investment, I think it's worthwhile. And probably just the other factor that I would touch on is if you're purchasing investment, you want to be able to hold the property for at least 5 years. So have some sort of view on when you think you'd like to purchase the long or family home, because often we see people, if their first purchase is an investment, they often end up selling that to get into the home, and you wouldn't want to be selling that first purchase if it was an investment within 5 years, because often you will have struggled to have had the capital growth and rental income to outperform your holding costs, your loan repayments, your stamp duty costs, your interest costs, and especially when you factor in capital gains tax as well. So you just want to have an eye to be able to hold that property, ideally for 7 to 10 years, but at least 5. So there's some of the key considerations that I think you need to factor in. But my preference, I think, getting in sooner rather than later at that 90% LVR, despite that lender's mortgage insurance cost, is worthwhile. And that cost is tax deductible if you're buying an investment property.
I love it. So we've talked about two challenges associated with that first question, and that is by waiting longer to get the 80% LVR and the better interest rate, the market might have moved away from Max. But also, the earlier he can get that property, the more he can enjoy that, as you said, 2 or 3 years of capital growth. And I think it's a cost benefit analysis, isn't it? You look at the LMI
Mm.
and you weigh that up, and it is a cost that you can claim against as well. It adds to your cost base. Now, there's another question here that Max has asked us. Can you discuss the implications of buying a cheaper asset to get into the market sooner rather than waiting for a better asset? And I think this is the negative outcome to the question in my view. And I don't think it's a great move for Max to make. And I think it's obviously a compromise, but this compromise will cost him in the long run. Whether it's an underperformance asset, we only need to have 0.5% difference year on year for a long term result to be significantly lower. But it also could cost him in terms of the category of property that he purchases. It might mean that instead of buying a house, he's buying a unit, or it could be a unit in a more difficult and challenging area socially, so that his active management of that becomes quite painful. Dave, what do you
Mm.
think about the idea of buying a cheaper asset?
Yeah, look, I'd prefer not to buy a cheaper asset and compromise on the quality of the investment. But so let's then try and put some parameters around that, which Max can take away. I'd ideally like to see an investor with a budget of at least 500,000, but preferably 700,000 or more. I prefer investors to start with that budget of 700K or above, so they are able to select a location that is more likely to allow them to purchase a better quality asset. Do you have any, in terms of price point, entry price points, do you have any sort of parameters that you prefer, Kate?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Dave. And it comes down to what you're trying to achieve. If the investor's already worked out a yield that they're prepared to settle for, and and their brief is to go for a unit, that will certainly have a bearing on the price point that we're considering. But with houses, I'm I'm saying to anyone coming into the Melbourne market, we can't really work with less than a 750 budget for a house on its own block of land. Um, Beneath that, you're probably looking at some regional areas, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just comes down to what you're trying to achieve. And you mentioned about a long term hold. When it's an investment, I'm really keen to see it as a 10+ year investment. I mean, the ideal is multiple decades, get it paid down, sit on it, enjoy the rent and the capital growth, and make some good decisions closer to retirement. But if it's less than 10 years, I'm really not keen to see that investor get involved in buying something on the property market. I think it's the wrong asset class when you're looking at short term holds.
So on that point, Kate, where you'd prefer them to hold it for 10 years or longer, I 100% agree. I mean, ideally, you're holding it through to retirement and it's building your nest egg. But that's also why it's so important to have that conversation with your trusted advisor or with your partner or with yourself. You know, have I purchased my long-term home? And if I haven't, how is that purchase going to
Absolutely.
impact my investment property? Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, just tying in the question that came from Max and focusing on the root cause of the question, he started by saying, I'm a young investor with a decent income and terrible savings. Now, if he's got a good income, I want to circle in on what's making his savings capacity terrible. It might be circumstances that he can't help. It could be that he's got a raft of commitments at the moment that aren't long term, or it could just be that he's spending more than he should be on fun stuff or social things, whatever it
Mm.
might be. So I would love
Yeah.
Max to circle back to that and work out how he can not be a terrible saver, but be a better saver. And it might involve committing a portion of his income to a special savings account. It could be, you know, having an accountability partner. I'm not sure how it will work well for him. It depends on his personality type, but he's got to work out how to not be a terrible saver. And with that always comes sacrifice. So he's got to ask himself, what am I happy to give up? Not short term, but longer term, or at least medium term.
Yeah, I agree 100%. He really should set up some sort of effective money management system that works for him, and he can have discipline around. And if he is a bad saver, then he probably does need money going into an account that he can't touch, because it sounds like he's on a good income, but as his income's increased, he has kept spending more. But if he has a commitment like his first investment property, then he'll meet those repayments and spend what he has left. So, I guess there is also another reason why it's probably worthwhile for him to get into second investment, because it sounds like he'll then cut back on his spending if he has the commitment of another investment property.
Nothing like a bit of forced savings, huh?
That's right. Yeah. Um, so, uh,
Now,
so I also think with the question about the price point and buying a cheaper asset. So it's sort of to what you'd said before. I think it's vital that once you set your price point, and you should do that first, you then match your location and your asset to your budget, and not the other way around. Because what people can do if they're set on a location is that's when they might end up buying a cheaper asset in the location than they can afford. So you've got to be willing to be flexible about where you purchase the property.
I completely agree. So, Max, thank you for your question. We've appreciated you penning that so that we could share it with our other listeners. And Dave and I are going to play switcheroo with who's hosting this next listener question, because there's a few Melbourne related questions in here that I'll be hoping to answer. And for all of our listeners that are thinking, gosh, we want to hear about the other states, I'm going to do my very best to put on my national hat here and not just focus too hard on Melbourne.
Okay. All right. So we have another listener question today from Peter. And Peter says, "Hi, I'm one of your podcast listeners. I'm impressed with your format and presentation." Thanks, Peter. I'm looking for townhouses or uh, house and land package investments in growth regions. I'm able to borrow 750,000. Based on your analysis, which are some 3 to 4 area suburbs in the 500 to $650,000 range for investments in Melbourne? Could you please shed some light on better locations for future growth in areas in Melbourne? I am talking to some property investment groups, which gives us a little bit of a shudder. What I notice is that their house and land packages and townhouse packages prices are 50,000 to 100,000 more than other local builders, for example, Metricon and Simmons Homes. So I'm not sure whether to go with them or go with buying independently. And he's just asked one other question: is Perth still a good place for new build investments? So, Kate, if I just start with, based on your analysis, which are should we start with which are some of the areas or suburbs that you could look to purchase in Melbourne, if there are any, in that 500 to
Yes.
650,000 price range, in your view?
Yeah, I can. And I will just start by saying land to asset ratio is very important. And we'll go into that later in this question when we unpack it. But I wouldn't be buying anything brand new in that 5 to 650 range. So that then pivots me to established areas where properties aren't new. There's no houses in established areas sub 650 that I'd be excited about buying in Melbourne. And I'm thinking about the socio-economic demographic factors. I'm also thinking about the size of the dwelling. I don't want something that's under 50 square metres. And I'm thinking about it zoning as well. I want to make sure that I'm getting a property that doesn't have anything that will trouble the banks. And lastly, I'm really focused on something that won't have high outgoings, because there's no point working with a smaller budget as an investor, hoping for some strong yields when all of your yields are whittled away by holding costs such as high owners corporation fees or strata fees or special levies. And that is the risk when you're looking at coming in with a lower budget than the average or the median price in the city. So just to recap on that, is Melbourne really the area that I'd be looking to spend that money if I wanted capital growth? I would absolutely be opening my eyes up to some of our bigger regional cities because I think your value for money and your capital growth proposition is far better than trying to get something brand new off the plan in a fringe area.
Yeah, so I would echo those thoughts as well for our listener, Peter, here. Now, it seems as though he's called them property investment groups, but we suspect they're actually developers who are selling house and land packages to him, and they obviously come across as being investment groups, or he's talking to someone who's working with the developer to try and sell those properties and looking like they're investment groups, which is quite a concern for us, isn't it,
Mm,
Kate? Do you want to unpack some of the
big
reasons for
time.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, they often are called introducers. So commercially, the introducer is the person that signs up the buyer, and then the developer pays them a really big commission. Now, interestingly, Peter noted that the house and land and townhouse package prices were 50 to 100 grand more than going direct to a local builder. And the reason for that is they've built in the introducer's fee. They've built in a really big commission payment that goes to that introducer. And some introducers might be working for multiple developers. So they might have a list of properties that they've got available for their clients that are in all kinds of areas. It doesn't mean that they're working independently. They're not. And I hate using the word spruiker without knowing an introducer because not every introducer is trying to do the wrong thing by someone. But the problem that we have is that they're not matching the client to the property. They've got a stock list. Their job is to sell something and they'll get a commission. Now, to put this into perspective, some of these commissions are 6% of the purchase price. So for, let's say, a $600,000 purchase, they're getting $36,000 straight away. As soon as Peter's signed that contract, they get their $36,000 on settlement. That comes off the price that he's paid. The lenders know it as well. So the prices are inflated because there's two things that are being covered: a bit of extra margin and the introducer getting their fee. So all of that makes me very, very nervous. Not only is he looking at buying brand new, where the land to asset ratio is too low and his capital growth prospects are impacted, he's also risking overpaying for something. And most importantly, he's risking purchasing something that isn't actually suited to him and hasn't been independently chosen for him.
Yeah, that's right. And look, some other risks with what you're looking at here, Peter, is there's a real lack of scarcity in the asset that you're looking to buy. It sounds as though where you're looking to purchase, there's lots of other new builds going up. So there's lots of competition there. I would suspect there's a lot of free available land. So when all the properties that are being built at the moment have been purchased and settled upon, is there space for then the developers to go and build new properties just next to or nearby the properties you are looking at? And then they're going to be competing with your properties. But the difference is the people looking to get into the area you're looking to buy, are they going to want the new shiny property to live in or as an investment, or are they going to want a property that's been depreciating and is a bit dilapidated and not looking as good as it did 3 years ago or 5 years ago? And the problem you're going to have there is therefore your value is going to be put under pressure. And that's why one of the reasons why your capital growth tends to be weaker when you buy a house and land package. But we've done a number of episodes on this topic, Peter. So we direct Peter and our listeners to have a listen way back, episode number 16, Unpacking Land to Asset Ratio. In episode 58 and 59, we did off the plan purchases, everything you need to know. Episode 60, why established properties outperform. And then episode 243, we touched on this topic, building long-term wealth, mastering land to asset ratio. And episode 303, we also spoke about avoiding property investment traps, off the plan risks, market timing, and spotting property spookers. So I really would recommend you listen to those episodes where we unpack the nuts and bolts a bit further for you with regards to your question today. Cate, he's also asked about, is Perth still a good place for new build investments? What are your thoughts there?
Mm. Now, this is where I put my national hat on, and everyone who listens to this show regularly knows that I'm not a Perth expert. This question goes beyond Perth, though. I think buying any brand new build, we have to circle straight back to all of the principles that you've just gone through now, Dave. And house and land these days, we know that the plots are far smaller than your 1970s quarter acre blocks. And townhouses can often be on plots as small as, sub 100 square meters. Now, in the middle of the city, that's okay. When you're buying around, Brunswick and Clifton Hill and Carlton and South Yarra, a townhouse on its own title or in a small strata group with that kind of land size, that's okay, because you're looking at land values that could be potentially, close to $1 million for 100 square meters of land. But when you're out in the fringes, wherever you are, whatever capital city or regional city you're targeting, if you're looking at an off the plan townhouse in the fringe, I'm really worried, because the land value, that proposition, it's going to set you up for underperformance when it's brand new to start with. And these small townhouses on small blocks of land will be competing with houses on normal sized blocks of lands for the area. So I'm particularly nervous about a brand new off the plan townhouse in any location, particularly when it's in the fringe. So is Perth still a good place to target new build? Well, as we know, Perth is still firing. There's still heat in that market, but its rate of growth has slowed down. Perth was really doing well for the last 3 years. It's been performing, at pace. But I would say to anyone, if you're targeting a capital city that's had a really good run, you don't want to be the last person when it peaks that's targeted. And sometimes you can't help that. But to make things worse for yourself, when you're targeting a brand new or off the plan purchase and the heat's come out of the market, the risk is actually at settlement date. Now let's assume that Perth keeps performing. We'll probably get to a settlement date with that sunset clause in mind, where the property has still gained enough value for the settlement to go through smoothly. However, if any capital city comes off and if it experiences any price declines and you've purchased off the plan, you could find yourself in a really horrible spot of bother, because if the valuation doesn't stack up, you risk losing your deposit. So I'm very, very cautious about long-term plays for settlement on a 2-year time frame or even a 1-year time frame in a market that's been quite heated and could come off.
Yeah, look, I think, Peter, if you're looking to buy a new property, we would suggest that it needs to have something really unique about it that's going to remain long term. That's what's necessary to provide good outperformance capital growth on a new property. Now, that might be in a beautiful old building that is, 100 years old. It's got a real unique factor to it. It's predominantly owned by owner occupiers who are buying to get into that, new development. It's got an amazing view that can't be built out. There's got to be something unique for a new build to really pay off. It might be a lovely townhouse that's just one of three in a fantastic location where there are mostly other established properties nearby. But if you're talking about getting into a location where it's one of 50 or one of 100 plus house and land packages and there's lots of free land nearby, there's a lot of risk to that. And so we would strongly caution any of our listeners to be very, very careful when they're looking to purchase a house and land package if there is no scarcity factor or uniqueness about that property. And we, as I've touched on, we've unpacked this in greater detail across a number of episodes previously. But that would probably be a key takeaway message here for Peter in terms of buying off the plan, house and
Yeah.
land.
Yeah, I would love Peter to explore what some of the established house options look like for his budget. And circling back to the 500 to 650 range and where else could he look, I wouldn't be afraid to suggest either looking at some good regional cities or have a look at some more affordable capital cities, because I think that horse is bolted in Melbourne when it comes to houses.
Yeah. And look, something I was going to share with our first listener question is you want your price point ideally to sit around the median price point of the city or location that you're looking to buy. I mean, ideally, you're getting an asset that owner occupiers would like to purchase and own, because owner occupiers are the ones who actually, they're the price makers in the property market. They own 2/3 of all properties. Ideally, I would like my investors not to drop further than sort of 20 to 30% below the median price of a certain location. So that's something for you and our first listener to factor in as well. Listener question to factor in also. Um, is there anything else you'd like to add there, Kate? He's also just asked, could we shed some light on some better locations for future growth areas in Melbourne? Did you want to touch on that or any other points in regards to his question?
Of course, if I put my Melbourne hat on and I'm looking at established property, I would love to circle in on some two-bedroom opportunities that have good floor plans. So I'm actually talking about units and boutique apartments. Now, some people might be rolling their eyes saying, "What is Kate talking about?" We've recently seen unit performance outstripping house performance, which is the first time in a long, long time. It doesn't mean that it will be sustained forever, but it does show that that ratio between house and unit prices and performance is at its largest, and there is elasticity in that. We're also seeing with the changes to the deposit guarantee scheme, where the date has now been brought forward to the 1st of
Yeah,
October and the income caps have been removed. We're going to see a lot of first home buyers taking
increased.
advantage of that with a 5% deposit in that, sub 950 range. And so that will put price pressure on everything under 950. And I would be targeting some really good popular areas that have high amenity, rail stations, shops, access into the city in less than half an hour on a train. If you could manage that, and you certainly can, in Melbourne, you'll have a better chance in Melbourne's northern suburbs than in the east, but you'll get some really good areas there where you could purchase something within that range. And just to throw out a few examples, I'd certainly look around Reservoir, which is a very big suburb, but that's directly north. I'd also consider what you could get in the quality apartment market around Ascot Vale, Moonee Ponds. You might get some apartments also around Flemington and Kensington, which are well within the 10K radius. They're 5 kilometres from the CBD. So I've just thrown out some ideas there that would be worth looking into. And of course, I'm based in the inner west, and I could mention plenty of areas where you could get a nice apartment that's boutique, that's well cared for and really well located. So I think we have to have a bit of a shift from buying something glossy and new to what great areas are out there offering established stock.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Kate. And this is going to add extra competition to the property markets across the country, which are already heating up from the rate reductions we've had. And this is from October 1. And if we look at the price points on the deposit scheme, that how much they've jumped by, Sydney's has gone from 900,000 to 1.5 million. So a first home buyer can get in up to 1.5 and make the most of this. Melbourne's only gone from 800 to 950. So I imagine they've linked these to median prices, which is why
Yeah.
Melbourne's is so much further below Sydney's. Brisbane's gone up to from 700 to a million. So it's jumped above Melbourne. Adelaide's gone from 600 to 700. Perth 600 to 850. Hobart 6 to 700. Canberra 750 to 1 million. And Darwin, for some reasons, only stayed at 600,000 despite all its growth that's happening at the moment. So you're going to see a whole lot of extra competition up to these price points. So if you're an investor and you're looking to get into the market, this is another reason to get in sooner rather than later, because more first home buyers are going to be competing with you as time goes on, and that's going to continue well into 2026, which is when I have thought, it was one of my predictions at the start of 25, I actually thought 26 is going to be a big year for the property market.
I tend to agree with you, Dave. I think it's looking that way.
Awesome. Well, look, hopefully we've answered those questions well for our listeners today. We've had a few technical difficulties due to my internet connection in Echuca, so hopefully that comes through all right. And apologies to Jamie, who produces puts our episode together.
Jamie.
Sorry. That should be the last one before I'm back in Melbourne. But with that, further ado, let's go into our gold nuggets.
Now it's time for us to go mining for our gold nugget property tip of the day.
My gold nugget applies to our second listener question, and familiarising himself with land to asset ratio is really important. I think for everyone, a refresher is to listen to our past step or to read our link. I will embed that in the show notes.
I'll just make a couple quick points. If either of our listeners or any of our listeners are set on a location, but then they're shoehorning a low price point into that location, then I would not recommend that. You are more likely to be purchasing a cheaper asset, and that asset is likely to be compromised. So be willing to look at different regions, different suburbs, different states. I would prefer people get into the market sooner rather than later if they have an appropriate budget, especially given the market we're in, with rates falling, the deposit scheme just increasing, prices rising already. And as I touched on, I expect prices to rise at a faster rate in 2026. So, and as a general rule, I would prefer people to purchase an investment when they can afford to get into the market as soon as they can, as long as it aligns with the points I've mentioned throughout this episode. So that is my gold nugget or nuggets.
Nicely done. Well, we look forward to having Mike back with us in the studio next time, and safe travels, Dave.
Thanks, Kate. Only 2 more long drives to go and back in Melbourne. Everyone's looking forward to it, but it's been an amazing trip. And look forward to missed having Mike with us today, but it was good fun as always, answering a couple of listener questions with you, Kate.
Yeah, likewise. All right, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.